But John, feel free to start us off. Thank you very much for joining us.
No worries. Thanks, Lawrence. Thank you, Nigel. Thanks for the invitation to have a different kind of presentation. I normally like to get out and talk about birds in the bush, but when you can't go more than 5 kilometres, I can't travel into Manningham at the moment, which makes it a bit of a problem. The Great Aussie Bird Count is coming up on the 19th to the 25th of October. And this is a bit of a lead-in, and we'll talk a bit more about the type of birds we might see in Manningham. And mind you, this is not, while it's primarily focused on Manningham itself, a lot of these birds you'll see in other municipalities across Victoria, across Australia even. Manningham uses some of the data to put together distributions of bird species and things. So it's a really good citizen science project to be involved in. I'll just share my screen and we'll get started, Lawrence, I think. There we go. So a two-sided sort, I suppose. One, getting people familiar with some of the birds that they might see in the city of Manningham. And secondly, how they can go about participating in the Aussie Backyard Bird Count run by BirdLife Australia, a large citizen science project that they run once a year, generally around Bird Week, that anybody throughout Australia can participate in. Just as simple as just jumping on your smartphone, downloading the app, and you're pretty much ready to go. So let's just have a look. So this is actually the city of Manningham itself. So we've got from the Eastern Freeway thereabouts, up through Park Orchids, through Warrandyte, Wonga Park, and then follows the river pretty much all the way through to Bulleen, Doncaster East, and Templestowe in the middle. So you can see from this there is some tracts of green. So you've got this here I'm hunting is Ruffy Lake and Ruffy Creek. You've got the Park Orchids there with the Mullumbimby corridor through here, 100 acres also in Park Orchids, across up into Pound Bend and around Warrandyte State Forest Park, right on the creek there. And some over on the Bulleen over here, you've got Bowl and Billabong and wetlands over there. So there is a number of corridors of green throughout the municipality, and all these provide habitat for lots of different species of birds, as well as other fauna, mammals, reptiles, frogs, fish, invertebrates, etc. But we're primarily going to be focusing on the birds. So if you can actually, when we go and have a look at some of the information from 2019 on the map, you'll see the little dots pop up in these areas across the municipality. So putting this up gives you a bit of an idea, puts it all into the perspective a little bit when we get into have a look at some of the data. So the backyard. So this is my backyard. It's 4.5 metres from my back fence to the back of my house. Not a particularly large backyard, but in my own area, we're probably over 40, getting close to 50 different species of birds we've either seen in the backyard, flying over, or within the immediate stand on the front step pretty much and look out and see what we've got. So you don't have to have a huge backyard. You don't have to have a 5-acre block. You could be in an apartment almost, somewhere on Doncaster Hill, for instance, and still be able to get out and have a look at some of the spots. So backyard is probably a loose term. This is my backyard, but other backyards in Manningham might be 100 acres reserve at Park Orchids. We did a study there quite a few years ago now, and even in late April, so getting into late autumn, we probably got over 60 species of birds there over the period that we were doing the fauna survey. So my background is that I'm actually an ecological consultant, but also do environmental education. Prior to that, I was a teacher for 17 years in Queensland and in Manningham. So I got to know people like Nigel and Kathy Willis and others really well through through working as a teacher and doing lots of environmental education and sustainability works and things like that. Gave it up and went, you know, I've had enough. I've done my fair share of teaching. I want to go out and do something where it's really passionate. So that's about, you know, wildlife, plants, animals in Victoria. So as a consultant, actually across Australia as a consultant, but also we also run wildlife tours and to Western Australia and things like that as well as part of our environmental education part of the business. So 100 acres is a reserve we're quite familiar with. It might be Currawong Bush Park. This is down along those walking tracks towards the creek there. Mull Creek toddles across in the background here. It might be some of the wetlands. So this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Angelica, this is Brown's Dam at Park Orchids at 100 acres. So the wetland provides a different suite of fauna compared to just the woodlands or the more forested areas. And then you've got places like Ruffy Lake Park, Ruffy Creek flowing through it, the Bonneview wetlands, drain, whatever coming from off Donny Shoppo. Again, an interesting area, smack in the middle of the city. Quite a good, I've got a bird list of over 100 species from Ruffy Lake over about 3 or 4 years, about 10 or 15 years ago now. Or it might be Warrandyte State Park, all the different parts of Warrandyte State Park. So this is primarily Gold Memorial Road through here with the cursor, the Heritage Walk there with that little car park. Go up into Fourth Hill around here, then you've got Pound Bend and you've got Jumping Creek further around. We've got some really good areas that are within the 5Ks of home that you can get out, get a bit of nature. In my personal situation, I walk around track around a golf course as often as I can. Helps keep me slightly sane. But at the same time, I do a bird list as I'm walking around. And it's always a competition. It's multitasking. It's a competition to see how many I can see. Trying to remember what the bird call sounds are, observing the birds, and getting some exercise at the same time, and just being out amongst the wildlife and amongst the trees and the plants. Just being able to chill at home is not quite the same when you're at home every day of the week. Pretty much. So let's go and have a look at some of the stars of the show. We're talking about birds. Now, some of these birds are native and some of them are introduced or exotic species, and we'll talk about which ones are which. So there's a large number of birds that in the 18th century, 19th century, there was acclimatization societies that when people came out here from, Europe, England, the birds that they were familiar with weren't here. So what they set about doing was introducing a whole range of flora and fauna to make Australia a bit more like home, because you can't just pop back to you can't pop back there now at the moment either, but you can't just pop back there in any fast way. So they brought out a whole range of birds and plants and things that just sounds of home effectively. And these are mostly what we call our introduced species or our exotic species. So let's have a look. We'll start at some of the wetland birds. So Australian wood duck, or they're also called, depending on who you talk to, maned goose. And they're called maned goose. The males have got the dark chocolate heads. The females the more drab species, and that's the way it is for most birds. The male is the more attractive species, is more attractive gender, unless the males look after the chicks, and in that case, the female is the more attractive bird. Because she's able to attract a mate and then lay the eggs and leave the mate to do the rest of the work, and she goes off and finds another mate pretty much. So these males, and you can just see here on this male on the right here, it's got a bit of a ridge, and this one as well, a bit of a ridge down the back of the head. It's a set of feathers, and it gives, in fact, the one at the back here, you can see there's a darker brown stripe down the back of their head here compared to that lighter colour. It looks like a bit of a mane, as you'd imagine a horse's mane would be. So often, their other name is maned goose, but most people refer to them as wood duck, or Australian wood duck is more accepted because there is also wood ducks in American wood duck and wood ducks elsewhere. Partly the reason they would get the name wood duck is they actually nest in trees, or they're quite happy to nest in trees, sometimes 10 or 15 metres off the ground. You got your Australasian Swamp Hen, or it used to be called purple swamp hen, but there is other swamp hens across the world, and so it's now the Australasian bit defines it as being an Australian and New Zealand species, although it's self-introduced to New Zealand. Flies, if you've ever seen them fly, they don't look to be that strong a flyer, but they've obviously enough of them have flown over to New Zealand by themselves to actually set up populations over in New Zealand. And they're called pakikos in New Zealand. So these are around the wetlands, so Ruffy Lake, they would be along parts of the Yarra, in those reserves along the Yarra, etc. Anywhere that's swampy, they're omnivorous. They eat roots of aquatic plants, but I've also got footage of them pulling apart ducklings and feeding their chicks meat. So yeah, they've got long fingers that they actually grab hold, of vegetation and then just chew at it with that fairly strong bill. Eastern great egret, another one of these birds that has a reference to its location. There's great egrets across the world. This is a specific Australian subspecies at the moment, but is looking at being divided off and so it's been referred to as the eastern, as in the eastern hemisphere of the world. So the eastern great egret is a threatened species in Victoria. A wetland bird. This is is the largest of our white birds. Big, chunky yellow bill during the breeding season. Just this patch in front of the eye goes quite a green colour, and the legs turn yellow during the breeding season. The way I get a bit of an image on what this bird is, if I can see it, if there's a white bird out there, does it have this distinctive question mark in the neck? So if you're looking at it, you've got the head, it comes round and then into the neck, and then the neck forms an approximate question mark. So if we can just do this wonders of modern technology, have a look at this. So we start here and we go around and then we go down and then there's the body. That's what I mean by the question mark. So that's a key identifying feature of this species is it's quite a large bird, and look for that really long neck. So crested pigeons, I'll give you a little bit of an audio grab. Hang on, let's just make it.
Crested pigeon.
So the crested pigeon is a bird that we've come to know. It used to be a dry country bird, but since the millennium drought, we've had an influx of a number of the more drier country birds coming into Melbourne, into the suburbs and further south, and have discovered that there's a fertile feeding ground for them. The little crest here is where it gets its name. It's closely related to the bronzewing. So one of the other names is a crested bronzewing. But I just show you, so this is a distribution up and from 1970 to 2000. So this was as of half an hour ago. So that was, and these sightings are from that period. So this is from the Victorian Biodiversity Atlas. And what will happen with the information that goes in via the Great Australian Bird Count, BirdLife Australia and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, or DELP, have a data sharing agreement. So records that go in from that will get transposed across into the Victorian Biodiversity Atlas. And this is where consultants go to, consultants and other people go to find out information about distributions and historical records, etc., for all sorts of things. So this is pre-2000, and then as we know, roughly 2000 to 2010 was that what they call millennial drought or millennium drought. This is the distribution from 2000 to 2020. So in the last 20 years, there's been all these records pop up where they weren't the previous 30 years. And this is the same for a couple of other species we'll look at tonight. They've come down, they've come into the city, they've found out that there's a wealth of food resources in the city, and they haven't needed to go anywhere else. And in fact, many moons ago, back in the early 2000s, I used to do a early morning paper round around Doncaster East, and some of the streets had the spotted dove, which is the introduced species that's got a bit like, if you think about a Grand Prix racing, finishing flag around the neck. So that's a spotted dove or a spotted turtle dove, but it's an introduced species. They were quite common in some of the areas. And over the time of about 4 or 5 years, you start to see the crested pigeons coming in, and eventually it was crested pigeons that were the only pigeons you would see. And the spotted turtle doves had been moved out because of, presumably because of competition. So there's a probably those three in Port Phillip Bay. They might be trying to get to Tassie through the border, but I'm not sure about that. Sometimes it's just dependent on the accuracy of a GPS, but you can see they're right down onto the very, right down at Portsea, right down on the peninsula, Western Port, lots of records in Geelong and onto the Surf Coast, and in around here where they were not seen 20 years ago. So records that we're keeping through this Great Aussie Backyard Bird Count in 20 years' time will be able, potentially be able to use to show where the movement of these species is coming and going. Have we lost some species from this area, or have we, and have other species come in? So common bronzewing.
Common bronzewing.
So the male has a more of a custard coloured patch at the front of the head. The female is generally more as a duller colour. And the name bronzewing comes from, although this guy's got he's gone through is partially through a molt by the looks of it, comes from these feathers on the wing here. You can see that they've got a bit of a bronzy sheen to them. In fact, the genus name of the species name Chalcoptera indicates that they've got this bronzy coloured, coppery bronze coloured wing. There we go. All right, so common bronzewing. The bronzewings, particularly this guy, will often be seen feeding under wattles and things in the parks and in the reserves and things. They'll eat the wattle seeds. So as the wattles drop their seeds, so whether it be the light woods, the golden wattles, the black wattles, etc., drop their seeds, they come in, feed on them, and of course they feed like a lot of seed-eating birds, pick off little bits of rock and pebbles and things like that, swallow that to help the digestion in their crop, etc. Because, and in their gizzard, because they don't have generally have mechanical digestion like what mammals and particularly humans have, they use the rocks and things to help grind up the grind up the seed once they've swallowed it to break it down, and then obviously open it up to digestion.
Common bronzewing.
So common bronzewing. So this was from the survey. So this is Nigel's got the GIS team at Manningham to prep out some locations of bronzewings where they were seen across the municipality. So a few along the creeks, north of Heidelberg-Warrandyte Road, Park Orchids. So they're scattered throughout the municipality. There's also Ruffy Lake. They've also seen at Ruffy Lake from time to time. Yes, Len, all these birds so far are native. So these are all native indigenous birds. There's some birds that will come and go from an area, so they're migratory birds that we still consider are still called native because obviously they're native to Australia. But these are all local birds that will be here most of the time. Practically could go out any one day across the year and see these birds across the city. I think probably most people recognise the galah, or some people call it pink and grey cockatoo. So this is the galah distribution is fairly well spread across the municipality. Often they like the more open areas. They nest in tree hollows, so there's obviously got to be tree hollows, but more open areas like some of the parklands and things, particularly this time of the year, where they live on the capeweed. So they'll feed on the capeweed flowers and the seeds of the capeweed. They can become quite nonplussed by people just walking past. They just sit there and just continue feeding on the capeweed as if they're out on their own, completely oblivious to whatever else was going on. So that's why they're often found in some of these more open areas around the open parklands, the sporting ovals, etc. as well. Gang cockatoo.
Gang cockatoo.
These cockies one time used to come down out of the high country, out of the hills during the winter, autumn and winter when it was getting a little bit colder up there, so they were altitudinal migrants, come down into the suburbs, into the lower flats, etc., feeding during the autumn, winter. In the couple of years that I was doing regular surveys at Ruffy Lake, I got them across every month. And again, they've found that there are food sources here that they can do quite nicely. And this is a Cotoneaster tree. In the driveway at a residence I used to live in, Bulleen. So not only is this a Manningham bird, this was actually taken in Manningham. The male has this red crest. The female just has a grey head, no crest. And the young males you can see patches of red starting to come through across the face. Like the Cotoneaster, they also like hawthorns and lilac trees or white beech, whatever name you like to refer to that tree species as. They quite like the fruits that they find in around the suburbs.
Gang cockatoo.
Don't like that. So there's only a couple of sightings of the gangs. There's only 3 sightings in total. Couple around in the Park Orchids area, Ringwood North area, and then up in Wonga Park. So we'll see this same map put together with the birds that there's only a few sightings of. So they've all been plotted on the one map, but we'll emphasise which species we're looking at by having it highlighted. So so there's not a lot of records, although, as I said, Ruffy Lake is over this direction. Have had records over there, but that's over a number of years, and just means that people may not have been there, may not have seen them, etc. I think we're all pretty familiar with sulphur cresteds, cockatoos. They are, again, a large cockatoo, or they're one of our largest white cockatoo anyway. Quite common in the suburbs, seen around the sporting ovals, in people's backyards, etc. And along the creeks where we've got big river red gums, etc., growing that produce substantial size hollows for them to breed in. Another spot is Finn's Reserve there at Templestowe, and this is obviously the bridge, just hanging out, chilling out together on the bridge. They're probably looking for platypus, although they're actually looking onto the bridge rather than off the bridge. But they get together, they can form quite large flocks, noisy, raucous birds, but at the same time, it's great just to actually sit and listen to them and just take it all in. So again, sulphur cresteds across the municipality, not a lot in this more densely populated area through Doncaster East, closer to the parks and the creeks in Templestowe, down Mullen Creek, the Yarrows into Park Orchids, etc. So of course these results are only as good as the people that actually are able to put them in. And then you've got the yellow-tailed black cockatoo.
Yellow-tailed black cockatoo.
Often thought to call as it's about to rain. These guys used to live on banksias and things like that, but have become quite adapted to living on pine cones. So the tough beaks, they will shred greenish pine cones, they will shred them to pieces. So Ruffy Lake, in those rows of heritage pines in Ruffy Lake, they're often in there. Other areas where pines are still persistent, where pines are still growing. What they also have this what's the word? Passion for grubs that live in wattles, and they'll actually sit on the side of a wattle and listen for the grubs they'll listen for the grubs, and then they'll rip open the wattle shrubs, yay big. They'll rip them open with their beak to extract the grubs out of it. That's what this one is doing here, just literally ripping open a substantial branch, and then obviously the branches either fall off and die or stay there for a period of time. But you can obviously tell that they've been there because of these ripping marks across the trunks. And if you look close enough, you'll probably find that there's a hole through the trunk where the insects where the insect larvae have been living prior to the black cockatoos coming along.
Yellowtail.
So not a lot. So up in north of King Street there, Foot Street, so there's only 4 or 5 records of yellowtail cockies across the municipality. In fact, I was heading down Eastlink this morning, and there was some yellowtails feeding on the side of the freeway down there. So they're definitely around, but they're a bird that you may not necessarily see, but that distinctive call is a good feature to pick what they are. So we got 2 Rosellas. So pretty much, apart from the wetland birds, these first group of parrots and cockatoos. And Australia is often referred to, in particular in bird circles, as being the land of parrots. So we have around nearly 60 species of parrots, I think, parrots and cockatoos in Australia. Excuse me.
Crimson Rosella,
So that was an adult crimson.
Crimson Rosella,
And this is a juvenile. Straight out of the nest, they're primarily green. And as they age, they start to get the colour of the adult birds. So this green is all over. So across the head, around the cheeks, etc. As a young bird, that's you'll see them. You often get confused because there is also a green Rosella. But the green Rosella is a Tasmanian endemic, and a lot of people confuse one because it's green, but in fact it's a young crimson Rosella and changes colour as it molts out of its juvenile plumage. So a few, but mainly in the eastern half of the municipality, because they're generally more of a woodland, forested bird rather than an open paddocks, a more open area bird. So you've got this area out here, effectively to the left of to the west of the Mullen where there's no records at all. And then people who might probably be familiar with this one, the sauce bottle bird, as I refer to it when I'm talking to kids. Rosella sauce, this is the bird. The redhead, and you'll notice it's got a white cheek patch, not a blue cheek patch. There's both blue-cheeked Rosellas and the other group of them is white-cheeked Rosella. So slightly different call.
Eastern Rosella,
So that
Eastern Rosella,
so these
Eastern Rosella,
man, these Rosellas like to feed in more open countries. They'll feed on the lawns, they'll feed in the open parklands, and you can see that they're much more widespread throughout the municipality. So whereas the crimsons didn't go west of the Mullen, so this creek through here, the Easterns are being seen right across the whole area. The Australian king parrot, males have these beautiful red heads, red bodies, green wings, and these little pale bluey green stripes down the wing. The female has pretty much green head, green body with a bit of red around the legs, etc., and the belly.
Australian king parrot,
They're a fair bit bigger than the Rosellas, and often a quick glimpse of the red without seeing the wings, etc. People can get them confused with the crimson Rosella, but these have quite a long tail. So they are. So when they're flying, big wings, red down the front, but a much longer tail than the crimson Rosella. This is actually sitting on the garden seat just outside my back door. This is a young male, so you can see that the red is starting to come through the head. Doesn't happen with the females. The females stay that greeny head and body that the young juvenile birds would have.
Australian.
So king parrots again, a couple along closer to the Yarra over in Bulleen, and then primarily to the eastern half of that Mullen often seems to be a bit of a corridor when looking at these distribution maps of where they're sighted. and a divide almost. So some things will happen on both sides, some things will only be on one or the other. Now, rainbow lorikeets, probably nearly everybody I'd say is familiar with rainbow lorikeets.
Rainbow lorikeet.
I think probably every park has at least one pair of with any decent sized trees has at least one pair of these nesting in it. Ruffy Lake, I have seen rainbow lorikeets. Obviously, whether they're just playing around or whether they wanted the hollow, but there was a brush-tailed possum roosting in a hollow one day, and the lorikeets were jumping along, grabbing a tuft of fur out of the back of the possum, ripping it out, and then effectively flying away, and then doing a circle back to the branch, and then hopping in again and having another go. So it was a big game almost. It was about 4 or 5 of them just plucking out bits of hair, bits of fur out of the brush-tailed possum while I was trying to sleep in the hollow. They have become probably more prevalent in Melbourne, Greater Melbourne, over the years. And in fact, it was probably 20, 30 years ago, they were just starting to come into Melbourne, and now, of course, they're pretty much everywhere. So we have actually 4 species of lorikeets in Melbourne. Actually, we have 5 species of lorikeets in Melbourne. These are by far the most common.
Rainbow.
And then we have musk lorikeets.
Musk lorikeet.
They're a much smaller bird than the rainbow. They're more green, brownish on the wings with a little patch of yellow, but they've got this red head and mask effectively, with a bit of blue across the top. So through the eye, the red on the cap, and primarily a green colour. They have a different call, so you can pick them as they're flying by the call. The other 3 lorikeets are the scaly-breasted lorikeet, which is found more in the occasionally found in the northern suburbs, and also been recorded around Royal Park. Purple crown lorikeets, which are more northern and western suburbs, and the little lorikeet, which is again in that northern western suburbs area.
Musk lorikeet.
Redrum parrot, primarily the shot to show you where it gets its common name from, the red rump. So in this case, the male is quite a vivid bluey green on the head and the chest, and then yellow belly. The female is a drab olive colour, pretty much all over. So there's a male that vivid blue green, yellow, blue on the wings. The other name for these is also some people call them grass parrots, because they spend a lot of time actually just feeding in the grasslands, feeding on the heads of grasses and daisies and capeweed and all those types of things that's on the ground, sporting ovals as well, just nibbling their way through even mowed sporting ovals, etc. In some parts quite common just to see them on the ground. Then they fly up into the trees when they're disturbed. So what we've got is we've got the longbill and the shortbill corella. Now, back in the 70s, the longbill corella was considered a potentially endangered species. And when they first brought out wildlife laws, keeping laws anyway, back in the mid-70s, the longbill was on the highest level because it was considered to be an endangered species. And its original distribution was southwest Victoria and into southeast and South Australia. Now it's all over Melbourne, and in fact, it's gone further than that because this photo is actually taken in Perth. The reason why I want to stick the eye like this one is because it shows you the difference between the two corellas. So the long bill here has got lots of red around the face and a long bill. The little corella at the back doesn't have all that red, has a much shorter bill, but does have a crest. The longbills, that's as good as a crest gets on a longbill. That's a little corella crest. Now these guys we've seen digging up those onion bulbs, so that Romulea of those little pinky purple 6-petaled flowers. Onion weed, they actually dig up the bulbs from under the soil, helping to aerate the soil. But if you're a golf course curator or something like that, you may not necessarily wanting them to be ripping up your fairways, just because even though they are helping with your weed problem. But again, these birds have come into the city, and it's the corellas. There was a big issue with corellas in autumn. So I think it was autumn this year or autumn last year, when the plane trees have come into fruit and have got their furry balls of seed pods. The corellas just love them, so they strip them to bits, and they leave bits of plane tree fur all over the cars and houses and footpaths, and people in the more well-to-do suburbs where the plane trees exist don't particularly like them at that particular time of the year, because they're, again, a bird that's moved into the city and found food resources that they can live on, that they can sustain their populations. When I first moved back from Queensland in 2002, I saw about 150 corellas one stage, and they were mostly longbills, but they're also shortbills as well, at a park. And I just kind of had to stop and have a second or third look, because 7 years previously, when I'd moved to Queensland, even though I lived up in Ballarat, little corellas especially were not very often seen, and if they were seen 40, 50, 60 k's north of Ballarat. They weren't seen in the middle of the suburbs. So again, a refugee from the millennium drought pretty much has come along and found that they can have a very nice living in the suburbs. Now these are some of these next birds are birds that we didn't actually get any records of, but would love to pick up some records. It's known that there are some reserves in Manningham that have them. Warrandyte State Park has powerful owls. They're an endangered, or they're a threatened species in Victoria. They are also our biggest owl species in Australia. And the name, they've just got this mesmerizing yellow iris and big, powerful legs, which is where the name comes from. Their primary food source around Melbourne anyway is probably ringtail possums. And often powerful owls will be seen roosting of a daytime with half a ringtail in its claws. Haven't eaten the front half and keep the back half for tomorrow night. So they work out that a pair of owls will go through a ringtail a day effectively, half for each bird. And during the breeding season, that will double as they're feeding their chicks as well. But one of the things with the powerful owls, there's been ongoing research in parts of Manningham with powerful owls. They need exceptionally large hollows. So although we've got lots of ringtails all over the municipality, there's not the breeding resources for these powerful owls. They need huge hollows that could be 1 to 2 meters in length and substantially round before they will nest in them. So there's only a few spots across the municipality where those types of resources are found. And of course, some of this.
Powerful owl.
And it's amazing how far that noise will travel on a still autumn night, because they breed start to prepare to breed from around March, April through to June, July. And on a still night, if you can hear a powerful owl calling, it could be kilometres away.
It's certainly quite spooky.
Yes, it can be quite spooky and not quite as spooky as barking owls, though, eh, Nigel?
Well, I was going to say, John, does that mean you can do the Aussie backyard bird count at night time?
It does, yes. Why not? There is a number of birds, and we're actually going to be looking at the nocturnal birds now. There is a number of...
There's a breeding pair of powerful owls at Bulleen Road near Bulleen Art and Garden that has a tracker on them. So that's a really significant breeding pair there. And there's also one at Carrong Bush Park at the northern part of Carrong Bush Park that heads up. Its range goes into Park Orchids. So we'd love to hear from all those Aussie backyard bird counters if you see or hear powerful owls. And record the call, John, is a good way to do it too.
Yes, you can record, because the male and female have a slightly, have a call and then a respond. The other will respond in a different, so they'll have a different contact call, but they'll also have a call when they're corresponding, chatting with the young ones, or have like a trill call, etc. So there's a number of different calls, but definitely if you believe you got them, go out and just take even if you have to, with your phone, if you don't have an audio function on it, use the video function. It doesn't matter whether the video is black, but just use it because it will pick up the calls. And then you can use that as, to put in your records, as, because species like this, particularly threatened species, people will, scientists, etc., will want to know where, potentially get some veracity of the results. Was it actually a powerful owl? Was it something else? And if you've got the call, you say, well, here's the call I videoed or I recorded. It helps back up the information, because often I've had people tell me that they've seen powerful owls on the power lines outside the house. It hasn't been powerful owls, it's been something else we'll have a look at shortly. But there is a number of night birds, nocturnal birds that would be good. So if you're out and about, and you're getting your hour of, exercise at, a nice moonlit night or something like that, or you just happen to be backing onto a reserve, and you able to just record some night calls, etc., most certainly add those to the records, because they're some of the important ones, because we often don't know a lot about, particularly things like powerful owls. It's been a long-term study of the pair that hang around in Park Orchids, and they've got trackers on them, and they track where they go all over the suburb pretty much, and further afield, while they're out there looking for prey. So quite a few suburbs in Manningham actually have resident powerful owls.
Powerful owl.
Then you've got the barn owl. This is a smaller owl, often adapted to more in the open country. So they have a habit of living in old buildings and barns, as the name suggests. Hay sheds. They'll also roost in trees, old houses, etc. And they feed in grasslands, etc. Feed by observing, sitting on fence posts. So you might often see them on the roadsides if you're driving out of town a little bit when you can. Of a night, you often see the white owl type thing just sitting on the side, sitting on the fence post, just keeping an eye out for any mice or other things. And that eastern again refers to the fact that there is other barn owls across the world. So this is now an eastern, so it's more again an eastern hemisphere barn owl. Tawny frogmouth. This is probably, most people might recognise the tawny frogmouth, but this is what I often get people say, oh, taking a photo, we saw a powerful owl, here's a photo, and it actually turns out to be a tawny frogmouth. It's just because it's got maybe similar striping and markings sort of, but not really. It's a much smaller bird. And the reason why they're called a frogmouth is they have such a wide gape. So if you can see the cursor's on the tip of the bill, and the mouth extends from there to there, effectively. So they've got a really wide gape, like, as the name suggests, like a frog. So, and these guys will happily nest in lots of, smaller reserves and things. Where there's some trees, they'll hunt insects via underneath the power line, underneath the street lights, take moths and things as they're just, attracted to the street lights. They'll actually just backwards and forwards through the street lights, picking up moths and beetles and all sorts of things. They'll also eat mice, other small vertebrates that they can find. But quite common and quite chuffed if there's, quite a few people, I've got a tawny frogmouth nesting in my yard. That's definitely something to be proud of.
Tawny frogmouth. Tawny frog.
So you can see that the call itself, because it's such a distinctive call, you don't have to actually see the bird to know what the bird is. So you can still use that as your, yes, I've got it, I've heard it. That's a tawny frogmouth. You can put it on your list. So you've got, end of Doncaster East there, and then down along Creek, the looks of it, Eastlink. So not a lot of records of tawny frogmouths that were submitted last year, but they are probably a lot more common than these records indicate. This is our smallest Australian night bird. It's neither an owl nor a frogmouth. It's a nightjar.
Australian owlet nightjar. Australian owlet night.
Sorry. The owlet nightjar is a bird that's only about, its body's only about probably, in old measurements, 6 inches long. You can tell it's a nocturnal bird. It's got those big eyes, and inside the beak, it's got little, you can probably make out on the photo, just little black feathers that actually look like whiskers, and they help to it hunts insects, etc. So it helps to pick up, helps it to feed these. So these little whiskers sitting out the side, like cat's whiskers. But they'll often be found on the ground, just perching on the ground. At the surveys we did in Currawong, we actually picked up an owlet nightjar sitting on the bait station for a camera that we had mounted on the ground. So it come in and was just sitting on there and just have its photo taken. Around the Gold Memorial Reserve on Gold Memorial Road there in that Warrandyte Fourth Hill area. That's quite a good spot for them. And you may not see them, but chances are if you're out of a night, you may hear them. It's just a matter of knowing what you're hearing. So the frogmouths and the owls and the nightjars are not related. Everybody thinks that a frogmouth's an owl. No, they're all separate. They're just the fact that they all, choose to be nocturnal and have a similar coloration. I try to, talk about it. It's like having, the local factory worker as opposed to the person that does overnights at McDonald's, and the person that does the overnights at the service station. They're not the same. It's not the same job, but it's different people doing different roles. They all just happen to be working overnight. So that's the owls, the nightjars, and the frogmouths are all that group. They're all nocturnal, but they're not necessarily They're related. And we're all familiar with Kookaburra. I haven't got a call for that. I think most people probably know what a Kookaburra sounds like. Will nest in the suburbs. We have one. I had a top taken out of a big gum tree, and they put a hole, bored a hole into the side into the entire tree, and that was about 4 or 5 months ago. Discovered 3 or 4 weeks ago there's a Kookaburra was actually nesting in the hole. When I first saw it was just having the tail feathers hanging out of the hole. So the hole was here in the tree. The tail feathers were just hanging outside the hole. So it got my attention. It's just in my street. Kookaburra. So reasonably well spread across the municipality. Now, okay, so magpies and magpie larks. Being a Collingwood supporter, I'm still in shock about what happened on Saturday night. But the magpies are actually related to butcher birds. They're in the same family as butcher birds and wood swallows, and pretty familiar. Magpie larks kind of get their magpie from the colour and lark from the size, but they're related to neither. They're actually a monarch, which is a type of a flycatcher. This is a female magpie lark. I also call them mudlarks or peewees or Murray magpies. Or they've got a whole range of common names. It's the female, it has a white face. The males have a black face for the magpie larks. With the magpies, you've got the ones down here are generally white all the way down the back of the head, all the way down the back. If you go further into Victoria and into Northern Australia, they'll have a whitish head, and then the back will be black. It's just a different colour variation of the same bird. These guys build a stick nest. The magpies build a stick nest. The mudlarks, as the name suggests, builds or the magpie lark builds a mud nest. And magpies themselves are actually a European bird, or an old world, a Europe, etc. Completely unrelated to the Australian magpie. But they've given it a name. It was given a name because it was kind of familiar with what people were used to back in the old country. So to make it a bit more accommodating in such a stark, unhospitable environment, they've called it an Australian magpie, so that people can kind of get a bit of a feel good about the fact that there's something that reminds them of home. But they are one of the best singers. They've got a fantastic melody and vocalizations. Australian magpies, fairly widespread across and I think probably one of the birds that probably it had amongst the most number of records from last year. Now I've got a little wattle bird. There's 2 wattle birds. So there's a little wattle bird, wasn't particularly common, but in Manningham probably 15, 20 years ago, they were generally found more along the coast. And these sound like this.
Little wattle bird, nominate race. Little wattle bird.
So that's the little wattle bird. It doesn't have those red wattles that the red wattle bird has. Similar, but these are actually honey eaters. Some of the largest honey eaters that we have. This is the red wattle bird call.
Red wattle bird, nominate race.
So the calls are different, and visually they're quite different. The red wattle bird has more bare skin around the face, and these red wattles are a bit like that of a chook, hanging off the side of their face. But at a quick glimpse, it could be one or the other. But if you hear them call, you can definitely pin down which species it is based on the call because they're actually quite different.
Red wattle bird, little wattle.
So little wattle birds, quite a few records here now. Probably if we'd gone back and looked at the data from the Biodiversity Atlas, you'd probably find that there's wasn't a lot of records 20 or 30 years ago. So they're starting to spread out a bit. And that's because more and more people are planting, you know, food plants that they're able to feed on, you know, Banksias and all sorts of other types of native plants, etc. in their gardens. They become more popular. So therefore, they've got a more familiar food supply. Yellow-faced honeyeater, one of the honeyeaters, one of the smaller honeyeaters, very, very drab except for that black head and the yellow stripe through the face here, hence the name. Often seen around the waterways and in the bush. So up along the Yarra here and down along the Coonung Creek. So between Thompson's Road and High Street, so in that area, they're off the back end of the freeway. Again, I'd expect to see them in park orchards along the river, up into the more wooded areas, up around Forth Hill and Warrandyte State Park, etc. In fact, Warrandyte State and Forth Hill, they're the Gold Memorial car park. Often used to go there. A few years ago, I did a bird a day competition where I had to see a different bird every day. I often go there and hang out and pick up things like yellow-faced honeyeater in the car park there. New Holland honeyeater, a black, white, and yellow, quite an attractive little bird considered, given the colours. Again, loves Banksias, loves grevilleas, Callistemons, those types of flowering plants. So a few records again on Coonung Creek, around along Anderson's Creek there, in park orchards and right out into Wonga Park. Eastern spinebill, very thin bill for getting into things like correas. So the flowers there, getting their bill right into the flower, getting the nectar out, and often you'll see these guys that have got a little yellow patch up above the bill. That yellow patch is actually the pollen, etc., that they've got from one plant as they're going to another plant, and then they pass it on. But yeah, again, a honeyeater.
Eastern spinebill, nominate race.
They can be quite common at different times. We've had them breeding out the front of it, outside our front door. But yeah, they quite like those lower shrubby, the correas and things like that they can get their bill up into. So these are almost if we were to say we had an equivalent of a hummingbird. They're quite a small bird, that long bill for getting into the flowers, etc. Eastern refers to Eastern Australia rather than Eastern Hemisphere, because there is also a Western spinebill that's found in Western Australia.
Eastern.
So only a few records here. So only like 4 locations. So in Wonga Park and pretty much along the river, along the Yarra, nowhere else. Now, this is an interesting one. Noisy miner versus a common miner. Which one's which? The noisy miner is a native honeyeater. The common miner is an introduced starling, effectively. So this is a member of the starling family. Other name used to be Indian miner, but it's gone away from Indian miner simply because it's not just found in India. It's not to do with any racial connotations. It's just the fact that it's not just found in India. It's found right across, Southern Asia, the subcontinent, etc. The noisy miner is a native. The common miner is an exotic species. Both are quite bossy. If you've got lots of noisy miners around, you won't have so many other small birds around because they like to dominate. It's their territory and they will chase little pardalotes, they will hassle all sorts of birds twice their size, 3 times their size, ravens and things, magpies, birds of prey. They're fairly tenacious little numbers. The name miner in this case, M-I-N-E-R, comes from the black face looking a bit like somebody who's just come out of a coal mine. But yeah, common. There's also the bell miner, which is closely related to the noisy miner, but it's green, yellow, with a yellow bill, yellow legs. And it's probably a bird that's, I reckon, almost disappeared from Manningham. There might be still some small populations. When I first started teaching in Donvale, there used to be populations along the Mullum Creek there off Tyndall's Road, around the school and other areas, and in park orchards. They reckon by about 2006, 2007, they'd gone. This guy just hangs around anywhere. A generalist will happily for a free feed. Anywhere. The common miner is also is a hollow nester. So it will nest in tree hollows. It will fight other native birds for that hollow effectively. It'll pull their nest out and it'll lay their own and put their own thing in. If you have nest boxes, and we'll give a brief mention of nest boxes later, if you open up a nest box, if you've got a nest box and you see a hollow in a tree and it's got bits of plastic and all sorts of other things and it has blue eggs, it's a common miner. It's not a native species. I'd happily suggest that you remove the eggs and dispose of them appropriately and pull the nest out, because they'll use bits of lolly wrapper and string and ties and all sorts of things, plastic. It's just like almost a rubbish pile with some vegetation mixed amongst it. They do have a substantial impact on our native wildlife, not only birds, but other hollow nesters as well, so mammals in particular. So there's a noisy miner spread right across parks, etc., right across the municipality. And that's a common miner spread as well. So you've got both of them got a spread across the area. Other birds, yellow robin, eastern yellow robin. There's also a western yellow robin, which has a grey neck, a grey-white neck, and then a yellow belly. This is an eastern yellow robin, common around Forth Hill, in some of those wetter places. It likes to live in along the water courses and things. One of the robins, this is the only yellow robin. We have about scarlet, red cap, flame, rose and pink. We have 5 other reddish robins, of which probably rose, flame robin, scarlet robin would all potentially occur. Well, I know those 3 do occur in Manningham. Probably the scarlet's the most common, and the flame robin comes down, is only seen in autumn and winter, but they're red, black, red and white birds. So there's a few spots there on the creeks here, and in the quite moist patches of some of these reserves. Superb fairy wrens, they have to, as the name suggests, they are superb in the colours. The males are the only ones that have colour. That's the alpha male. Even the subordinate males keep the colour of the females, because if they're seen as a threat by the dominant male, they generally potentially they could get kicked out of the family group. It's going to find something else. They do lose some colour during the winter, so they go into more of a winter or an eclipse plumage, as it's called. And then come breeding season, they go into their nuptial plumage, which is those bright, vivid blues, multiple blues and blacks. Yeah, females are quite drab brown. So a few, again, primarily around the watercourses or in the bigger patches of vegetation, but they quite happily live in blackberries and firs or gorse and other areas of weediness. Has got whatever's got that structure to the habitat structure more so than the types of the plants themselves. Still a bird, the white-browed scrub wren. It also lives in those areas, you know, harsh call when disturbed. And this only, again, very much a couple of specific locations, but I do know that, you know, around Ruffy Lake, in 100 acres, Currawong Bush Park, etc., they are quite a common bird. Grey fantail, quite a delicate little flittering bird, long tail. They get the name fantail because often when they sit, they spread their tail out, so they'll bounce around with their tail like such. Hence the name fantail. Again, more east in some of the thicker areas of vegetation. Woolly wagtail is closely related to the grey fantail. In fact, they're cousins. Well, they're congenus, so they're in the same genus as the other birds. But we happen to much nice name woolly wagtail. It's has a character about it. These birds are fantastic little numbers. They're insectivorous, but full of character. You know, hoof on to chase a wedge-tailed eagle by pulling on its tail feathers as it's flying along. Take on birds that are huge compared to it. Tenacious. And again, you've got open areas, some of these more open areas, some of the more bushed areas. Well, they're like a mix of areas. So whether it be open paddocks or often see them on fences and things like that. Somewhere where they can hawk for insects. Now, the white-winged chough has got a red eye. It's got this evil-looking red eye and a bit of a down-curved bill. And when they fly, they've got white patches in the wings, hence the name white chough. I've seen now these are a mud builder, so they build a mud nest, a bit like a magpie, but obviously a bigger nest. And generally up closer to the river, although I have seen them in Donvale, heading out on Tyndall's Road towards, I think it's Tyndall's Road. No, the other one. What's the other one? It goes past the CFA depot in Warrandyte.
Oh, its name escapes me.
Red box, that drier area around, up in around the back of Warrandyte State Park, etc. And they hang around in 10, 7, 8, 10 birds all scratching around on the ground. So here's a question. Is it a crow or is it a raven? It's actually a raven in Melbourne. Our nearest crows are probably most reliably seen at the Mildura tip. And they're a little crow. We have two types of ravens. Both have the potential to be seen in Manningham. One's much more common, this one.
Little raven.
As opposed to this one.
Australian raven. Nominate race.
The Australian raven's more a woodland, non-suburban bird. The little raven, anywhere around Manningham, that there's houses and streets and things, chances are you're going to be getting the little ravens. when you get out. So maybe up around some parts of Warrandyte up to the back of Wonga Park, you can get the Australian raven. I could never remember how to work them out until I was on a school camp, and one of the teachers said, "What's that bird that sounds like it's a bit slow?" And I went, "What do you mean?" She said, with the Australian raven call, it's like you told somebody a joke and they got it 5 minutes later. It's like, oh, now I get it. And ever since then, I've got, okay, I can remember which. But yeah, that's that drawl in that call that it's the 2 or 3 calls and then it drags off down. Again, it's using the calls as well as actually seeing the bird, because if you look at the bird in itself, you can't necessarily tell which one it is because of size. There's something to compare size with. If not, but if you hear it call, you can definitely give away. Now, what the difference between ravens and crows are: crows on the bottom, the colour of their feathers closest to their skin is white, and ravens are grey. So Australia has 3 ravens and 2 crows. Go up to Brisbane, Northern Country, they're pretty much all crows around Brisbane. Go inland, they can be crows or ravens. Pied currawong, so you've got your pied, distributed through here. Again, another bird that's spending more and more time in the suburbs. Not necessarily the best neighbour because they will happily pick off chicks of other nesting birds. So that's your pied currawong, and then you've got your grey currawong. This is not as common, and the slight coloration, grey versus black, and the combination of whites in the wings, the tail, the rump, etc. Enable you to pick whether it's a grey or a pied currawong. Red-browed finch, the only native finch that we would regularly get, or pretty much only get in Manningham, got this red eyebrow and this little stubby seed-eating beak. Wagtail State Park in around Currawong, 100 acres, anywhere where there's grasses and shrubs, effectively shrubs to nest in and hide in, and grasses to feed on. So down here, was it probably towards Yarrandarra? I would then in Park Orchids and out here, but there is a number of other areas that's probably been seen. We know they're in Warrandyte State Park. Seen them in their previous bird walks that we've done with the council. House sparrow, this is also a finch, but this is a different family of finches. This is an introduced species. These guys are getting rare in Europe, and particularly in the UK. I think the last count was like they had 6 million pairs, and that was a drop from around 20 million pairs some 10 or 15 years before. We could send them back a few 100,000 pairs without any great loss. So these are actually an introduced species. One of those species that was brought across to help people, feel like home. So how can we get some birds in our backyards? So that's pretty much the birds, a range of birds that you find across Manningham. Just by planting some indigenous plants is always a good help. If you've got a backyard, you can do it. There is 2.5 metres between the fence and the house. This is what it started like. This is just some native creepers, so some Coleus and some Happy Wanderer, or some Hardenberg. So plants obviously require some less nutrients, less water than exotic plants because they're used to the environment, particularly if you get them from somewhere like Faust, Friends of Warrandyte State Park nursery. And I think you were saying, Lawrence, that they do have a click and collect.
Yeah, Nigel was mentioning before that there is a click and collect on the Faust website, which I'll drop in the chat for everyone at the end.
Yeah, so indigenous plants, and they also provide fantastic shelter for wildlife, but birds and reptiles. So that's a start, and that that's what it looks like about 2 months ago, pretty much. So just create this little habitat here where the little thornbills can come and go into the water bath. The use of plants that provide nectar and things, so banksias and grevilleas and things like that. Bottlebrush, melaleucas that provide a food source for those, but not only a food source for the nectivorous birds, but they will encourage insects, and with the insects come other insect-eating birds. So this is in 2009, and that's in 2020. Just the use of a few plants, prickly moses, sweet basarias, have created a habitat where small birds can come. And so this is Croydon. Had those white-browed scrub wrens, we've had grey fantails, we've got brown thornbills, we've got eastern spinebills. In fact, straight out the front door, and that's our front door at the moment. Eastern spinebills have nested in this callistemon here last year. They love these little corridors that they can get in amongst. So just some native plants can help bring the birds from the backyard. So just a bit of a quick bit of info on the bird count from Manningham last year. So there was 91 species of birds recorded in Manningham last year. Of that, of all the records that came in to Manningham, it was all the records were gone through. So to just make sure there was some veracity, so there was some legitimacy in the data. One of the I think one of the mantras that I say, and I know Nigel talks about it too, if you're not sure what the bird is, leave it out. Don't put it on your list. I included birds from tropical Queensland, and chances are they're not ever going to be in Manningham. Not, you know, climate change and things change, and but so if in doubt, leave it out. There's an old saying: it's better to be considered a fool than to open your mouth and put it out of all reasonable doubt. The bird count, when you go through, and we'll talk about in a moment how we get through, how we use the app. If you're not sure, but you think you'd like to add it, grab a photo of it. If it's a half moderate photo off a phone camera, that's fine. Generally should be able to identify what the bird is. So somebody at Council or BirdLife Australia or myself or whatever will give it a good crack and be able to help, particularly if it's one of those records, and same for recordings, if it's one of those records that could be quite useful, like a powerful owl recording or a bird that's unusual. Like records of satin bowerbirds from 100 acres in park orchids. A few, but quite interesting records all the same. Some birds are nocturnal records, these will be great. But most of all, get out there, have some fun, learn lots, and enjoy the outdoors that Manningham, the reserves that Manningham has to offer. And I thought I'd just better chuck this in, Nigel. Remember to stay within the boundaries that is permitted by the Chief Health Officer. Hate to say, look, we were told we could go wherever we're doing this thing for the council, and they've told us, but no, remember you've still got to go with your 5Ks at the moment. That might change before the 19th of October. Maybe we live in hope. Just have a look at the bird app. So this is the actual bird count app. So you can download it from Google Play or the Apple Store, whatever that it's called, the App Store. You can also register to go into the draw for prizes. So binoculars and all sorts of other prizes are BirdLife Australia are putting up there for people to get involved in. Take some time to get familiar with the app. Even if you just sit in your backyard and you just record magpies and noisy miners or whatever, so you get a bit of an idea about how it goes. There's also a guide with the app, so there's a field guide that you can kind of suss out what your birds are. But get out there, wherever that may be, and just start collecting some data, because it's a fantastic citizen science project, and a lot of the information goes into providing data for Nigel, but not only for Manningham, but bird data from right across Australia becomes very useful. So this is, you have to forgive me if it doesn't look like this for you, if you're a Apple user. So this is Android. It's just called Aussie Bird Count. So install it, and then you've got something like this. So this is when you open up the app. It says how many days it starts in, how many checklists have already been submitted. So it doesn't have to be between the 19th and the 25th, but it's about a week either side. I went to do it mid last week in preparation, and it wouldn't let me in. It just said, starting soon. Let's get started. So you can say, let's get started. And that's where you start to, you can start putting your data. Or if you want to find a bird, you think, oh, that bird might be, I think that might be such and such. You can go in and use the Find a Bird app, Find a Bird section. That gets you to give you your details, first name, email address, etc. How are you going to get the prize delivered if they don't know who to deliver it to? And then it says birding experience. Are you a novice? Are you an intermediate? Or are you an advanced birder? If you're a novice, great. That's great. It's well worth a hobby to be, well worth a hobby to, if not for no other reason than just getting you outside and enjoying the outdoors. So you can put in whatever there, your state, and then choose your location. So I've just done one for Croydon Park the other day. So this was yesterday. So that was the location I chose. My location, I hit the next button, and then it says your time starts now. So 20 minutes is the preferred time. So there's a bird census survey technique where you do 20 minutes for 2 hectares, which is roughly 200 metres by 100 metres. But this is all, give yourself 20 minutes. So you can hit OK, and then the timer at the bottom here starts, and it will let you know when. And then all you do is you go, I need to type, I think it's a wood duck, so I type in wood, and it'll come up with of all the birds, so the wood duck, or the or a wood hen, or a wood swallow, etc. So you choose your bird, and then you can start adding the numbers, 1 or 2 plus or minus. Magpies, more hens. So this is the total I had yesterday. Sorry, this way. So when I got my 20 minutes, I pushed the stop button, and it said, okay, I came up with a checklist, date, a time, 20 minutes exactly, and the number of observers, being myself, and then you hit submit. So once you've hit submit, you can't edit your list, but you can go back and review it, and then that data goes into the overall. So when you go back to this, once you've put your checklist in, it might change that to 1918, and it's probably, I don't know how many thousand it is now, and however many birds you counted is added to the total here. And then you can go and look at the Sightings Maps, which is the next 2 I've got for you. I had 2 more maps to show the sightings of around Manningham. But you can go and look at the different areas where records have been put in your local area, and it'll also show you your site and the number of birds that you saw at that site as well. So that's the birds. That's a rundown on how to use the app.
Thank you very much, John. If you have any questions, anyone, feel free to drop them in the Q&A just down below, and we'll try and grab some answers for you before we head off. But yeah, once again, thank you so much, John, for spending some time teaching us all about birds of northeast Melbourne and showing us how to use the app. And I hope everyone has lots of fun in their backyards or local parks, getting out and spotting birds.
Thanks, John. Can I just also plug the Frog Census app? That you can also do your frog monitoring while you're out there doing your birds, which is also lots of fun. So look up Frog Census on Google or Apple, and also the Platyspot citizen science program. So if you see a platypus, you can also register that on Platyspot. Both those 2 are Melbourne Water citizen science programs.
Yeah, plenty of citizen science to go around. There's something for everyone out there. So all you have to do is get outdoors and get cracking into it.
The good thing is you can do it while you're out doing your 2 hours of rather than just doing the same thing over and over again, you can actually be out there going, oh, okay, there's a, you could change it up, make it a bit, we've got enough same at the moment. Let's taking opportunities like this, and there's a Frog ID app which goes, if you're not sure, you can record frogs and sends it off as well. But Melbourne Water have their own one. But yeah, just change it up, and it might even start a whole new interest for post-COVID COVID lockdown.
Perfect. Well, if that's it, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. I think we might wrap it up there. Oh, we have got one question, sorry, from Liam. He says, is the idea to only do the 20 minutes once between the selected dates, or can you do it several times in blocks of 20 minutes at various times and dates?
You can do it whenever. It's not just once. You can put in, you can do 20 minutes a day in your backyard, and you can do 20 minutes a day in the local park. There's no actual limit the number of 20-minute surveys you can do. So you do one every day for your backyard, go out when you're doing your exercise, your 5-minute walk, your hour walk or whatever, do it then. Maybe, you can do it 2 or 3 times. So you could do 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 during that week. You're not confined to just one answer.
Angelica's asking, is the council interested in getting records of birds outside the bird count window? So, for example, there's been a pair of southern boobook owls roosting in the 100 acres. I'd say if you've got any observations that you want to send through from what you've seen out and about, we have an environment email that you're welcome to just email that into, and I'll drop that into the chat now. And just, let us know what you've seen, and any information is helpful to us.
So if you've got a question, if you've got some information or stuff like that you're interested in, if you want a photo identified, contact Nigel or BirdLife Australia, or just drop me a message. That's fine, no worries. I'm always happy to help out.
We've got plenty more presentations coming up in the Spring Outdoors series as well, so jump on the Manningham website.
So part of the Spring Outdoors as well, but for Nillumbik. Yeah, that's good. All righty, folks. Stay safe, stay sane, and hopefully see you outside sometime. Cheers.